because that thing, what impact your work makes is going to end up being the way you create value and the way other people value you. Another thing that you'll never do again after school is a customer journey map. I mean, you might do it. Like, again, this stuff kind of comes up in the process of presenting and chatting about design with stakeholders, but like in practice, customer journey maps are a great way to talking about design. By way of contrast to customer journey maps, I wanted to share this example of a designer named Adam Fisher-Cox, who he was on a trip. He went through JFK, which is an airport here in New York. He looked at the signs in the little train that goes to the terminals, and he's like, "These signs are bad. I'm going to redesign them." And he did. He didn't do a lot of intense user research. He was like just a person waiting on the train, and he's bored, and he redesigned these signs. And the company in charge of these signs saw somebody he put them on the internet, and somebody saw them. And then they hired him to actually redesign the signs. His work ended up being incredibly impactful, even though it wasn't like super, he didn't like go and talk to a bunch of users. He didn't like do a bunch of like longitudinal research on viewing angles and whatever. It was just very clear to him that the signs were hard to use, and he was like, I should make them better. So this is a really great example of how I think that sometimes we get caught up in trying to make design about this like very strong intention to make the world a better place, or to do user-centered design, like, be the voice of the user or whatever. Sometimes you can just make the world a better place for yourself. Sometimes you can just solve a problem that you think is a problem, and maybe you didn't do a ton of deep research on it, but it's totally okay to just like go out and try to make an impact in the world. And however you can do that, that's great. And you don't have to worry about like the theory or the strategy. Okay, treat number 4. Hiring managers will only spend 30 seconds with your portfolio. You might have heard something like this before. I want to sort of reaffirm that this is true. This is absolutely true. As a hiring manager myself, I will only spend 30 seconds max with portfolios. That's not because I don't like to look at the portfolios and I don't want to look at the portfolios, but for every open job position, even at like Copilot Money, which is a small company and a lot of people haven't heard about it, I'll have 200, 300 applicants per position. And just doing the math, like if I spend any more than 30 seconds on each one, then that quickly becomes multiple years of my life. So yeah, it sucks because it's a lot of work that y'all have done, and I know that people are very proud of their work, but it's really important to keep in mind that 30 seconds is like no time at all. And so I wanted to give some like very practical advice on how to deal with the fact that people aren't going to look at your work from within 30 seconds. First, don't password protect your website. I know that there's like NDAs and stuff, but I'm really in the camp of like YOLO, like put stuff online. If you get an NDA, you can take it down. I've gotten an NDA before. I mean, not an NDA, a cease and desist. I got a cease and desist for my work at the Wall Street Journal. I put it on my website, and they didn't like the fact that I had like published something that hadn't been launched yet. And they sent me a really scary letter from a lawyer that was like, take it down. And I did, and that was it. But before I did that, that was like 5 years after I had done the work and I had already like gotten another job. So jokes on them, like I did its job. I didn't need it on my website anymore. If you password protect your website, a lot of the times, some of those precious 30 seconds are gone into the hiring manager having to find the password in your resume or in your application or whatever. And sometimes because of the software, like it gets lost in the mail and we have to like email you, and it just becomes a huge hassle. Yeah, so just stick your work on there. Don't worry about people who don't want your work to be out there. Put your work on the homepage. So like page loads, I want to see your work. I love, like the personal aspects of the site are nice, but like, if I see like a loading screen or like, maybe the thing is really spaced out and I have to scroll down a bunch. Again, I'm just like, clock is ticking. I'm like looking very quickly for what is this person, presenting, how are they different? And that's kind of like the last part is if you think about that idea that for each open position, I'm getting hundreds of applicants, they all really start to look the same. And like, I know every portfolio template out there. Like I've seen, like I can tell immediately when I open a site and like it's done using like a Wix template or whatever, I'm like, oh yeah, I know this one. Like I know exactly where they got it. So yeah, focus on, every single person has something that makes them different. And it can be as like obvious as like, there are some overachievers out there who like climbed Mount Everest and great, put a picture of you on Mount Everest. But also like whatever, like maybe you're just really into like Magic the Gathering. Like I actually have not seen a portfolio site yet be like, I'm really into Magic the Gathering. So that's open, that's out there for the taking. Or like Pokemon themed website, whatever, like go real hard on whatever's making it different because that will get you like some bonus time with a hiring manager. If they're just used to going through all of those like Wix templates over and over and over again, the second I see something that's just slightly new, breaks up the monotony, makes me a little bit more interested, I'm gonna scroll a little bit deeper. So yeah, like be weird, be different. I think that's super, super important. And then put your work out there. Another really practical thing, you should have at least 3 case studies because the first one, very important, show your depth, go real deep on a subject. The second one, show that you can like flex to a couple different positions. The third one, I'll probably never click on, but like I see 3 and I'm like, oh, that's a good number. And then like nothing's ever gonna happen after those first 3. But whatever, like fill it out. If you wanna have some extra case studies there, that's great. But when I'm looking at candidates, I'm like looking for that sort of breadth and depth at the same time. And so it's really good to just have like, a good headline that's like, 0 to 1, design this app. Maybe case study number 2 is like, we introduced a new feature to an existing app. And then the third one could be whatever. I'm very cynical about this, but again, kind of going back to the fact that people are not spending a lot of time with your website. Your goal is to say like, I'm good at my job and I'm somebody who you'll remember after going through all these candidates. So if you can get those things and you can get that next sort of callback and get the onsite, then you can present your portfolio in more depth. Case studies on your website, skip the affinity map, skip the user journey diagram, show how good you are at like the thing you're really good at, and put more Pokemon on the website. Okay, truth number 5, you should be really, really good at Figma. I think this is where I'm gonna get my crankiest because I know that people really love to hate on Figma as like, it's clunky and it's slow and it's annoying and it's like, why do I have to build all these components? And this isn't real stuff. I'm just kind of creating pictures of websites. And I actually like used to be really on that train of like, don't worry about it because it's not real. Just keep things low fidelity and like, don't worry about fussing with the tools too much. But going back to that idea of like trying to be persuasive and convince people of your vision, if you can put together a really good high fidelity prototype of your designs, and like maybe it's not Figma, maybe some other tool comes along and you're gonna use that. But the idea is like you should be really good at the tools that you use. There's this quote that we talked a lot about at Stripe, and it's from Picasso. He said that basically like art critics like to talk about form and structure and stuff. Artists like to talk about where to buy turpentine. And if any of y'all paint, like turpentine is just like what you put into the paint to thin it out. So when we're getting together and talking about design together as like design nerds, like I want to talk about like Figma. I want to get really excited and nerdy about it. And I think that as a tool, we should be really good at our tools, and we should like know the most about our tools than anybody else. And I think that's going to be a really powerful way to get at the persuasiveness and get at the impact and get at the role of the designer and the value that you're bringing, kind of counterintuitively, right? It's not about the thinking as much as it is about the execution, and the execution is going to happen with the tools. So like, you got to get really good at them. I've worked with some people who I'll just like mention something very briefly and they'll turn around and deliver this amazing, like well-formatted, very easy to read Figma document. And I just, that is really special. And I think those documents have a way of living a long life and getting a lot of use. Okay, number 6, it is not real until it's code. And this is something I have to remind myself a lot. Design, kind of maybe contradicting myself in what I just said about using Figma. I think we like to say like, oh, I did the designs, it's done, here they are. But the work that we do as designers is not actually done until it's actually software. Most of the time, I mean, some of you folks might not be working in software design, maybe you're working in, physical, like, product design. In that case, it's like not real until it's manufactured, which is a whole other thing, but it's very similar in that it's really tempting to hand the designs off to the engineers and say, all right, cool, my part here is done. But so many times in my life, this has happened. This is my like toxic boomer trait, is like Facebook cake memes. This is like what happens when you hand stuff off to engineers, is sometimes they just like do something that's literally right, but very wrong. So I'll just let you enjoy these really silly cake memes. But this is like, it's really important as designers to not like take your eye off the ball, work with the engineers on implementation and make sure that what gets done and what gets shipped reflects what you intended and the problems you're trying to solve. Some practical advice here is like, one of the first things that you should do when working on any project is just say, what's off limits? This is a little bit counter to, some other advice, which is like, don't worry about the technical constraints, just solve the problem. But I've seen a lot of times where we go off and do this sort of blue sky thinking and come to this brilliant plan, and then we come back to the engineers and they're like, well, we only have 2 weeks and there's only 2 people working on it, so you're gonna have to like cut way back on this. So it's really important. Say like, okay, what can we do? What are we working with here? And invite the engineers and work very closely with them. I know that this program is like very tightly integrated between design and engineering, so that's super cool. I love how powerful that is. And that connection is gonna be, I think, one of the biggest factors in any designer or engineer's success. Second is learn how to code. I know, whatever, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. People like to argue about this. I offer no apologies. I just think that if you don't know how code works, then it's really hard to follow through and get things shipped. And one way to do that is like use code adjacent tools. Swift UI for like native stuff. Webflow is great for the web. New tools like Lovable and V0 are like, I think a lot of really great engineers are probably like scoffing at this because like the code that they write is bad, but personally, I learned how to code by just like playing around and stuff like this. Is a really powerful way to get familiar with how code works. And you actually learn how code works before you learn how to code. So if you can learn how code works, like know that like, here's how the files are structured and this is how it's rendered, and learn like what it is versus client side. If you can know how to use those words, then like the learning how to code part will come very, very easily. So highly recommend just like learning new tools, trying new things out. Yeah, you can use ChatGPT like to code if you want, but ultimately, like, yeah, learn how it works. Okay, my last one. I think it's my last one. Most user research is unnecessary. This is coming from a place of like love and adoration for all of my user research partners that I've ever worked with. So often I see that the user research team comes up with amazing insights and really great and powerful, like, intuition about design, about users. And then we can't actually ship any of that stuff because the engineering team is too busy. And it's a bummer, like kind of going back to like being persuasive and how important that is and getting the technical constraints up front. But I found that in a lot of cases, we tend to do a lot of user research, assuming that if we can just come up with the best sort of argument for our design, then that'll be enough. But in reality, that hardly ever comes to pass. So it seems like it's kind of a shame because we learn a lot of really great things about users that we can't actually implement. So I think then the next question is like, well, how do you avoid doing the unnecessary parts and only doing the necessary parts? I think that this is a really good example of a time when user research was kind of unnecessary, and it's a good model to follow, which is like when you have an idea, you should just do it rather than trying to validate it. So this is an example from the company 37 Signals, who made Basecamp. And the founder of the company noticed that they were getting a lot of chargebacks from whenever they would charge somebody's credit card for their software. And he had this idea that like, well, it's because the name of the company is 37 Signals and the name of the software is Basecamp. And so when people are seeing on their credit card statements something called 37 Signals, they think it's like a fraudulent charge and they're canceling it. So he like had this idea. This is a really weird thing. This is not like when you think about trying to solve the problem of getting chargebacks, like you're like, oh, maybe you should like put up a page on our website, or like maybe we should change the way that cancellations work. No, he was like, we're gonna just put, instead of the name of our company on the credit card statement, we're gonna put a website URL, 37signalscharge.com. And now when people go to that URL, it's gonna literally say, why is this charge on my credit card? And what is it? And he had this idea, this is not something that he needed to like go out and do a test on. He didn't like do an A/B test. He didn't go and like talk to users. He just bought the domain and saw that it worked, straight to production. So this is an example where like, I think that all of us, and especially the longer that you work and the longer you are used to solving problems, you actually have a really strong intuition about what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I don't think you should say, I think that then we often learn to kind of tamp down that intuition and say like, well, maybe we should go do a study, or maybe we should do some research first. And that's actually great. User research, go for it. Like it helps to de-risk, it helps to create a lot of confidence in your answer. But if you can just go ahead and ship something, if it's lightweight, if you can find the right people, this is why being friends with engineers is important, just ship something based on your intuition, especially if it's low cost and low downside. And so I think that's really, really important. The last thing, and I realized that like I might not be able to share my computer audio. Let me see if I can do that real quick. Share sound. The last thing I'm going to do is show you this video. This is from IDEO. IDEO, the progenitor of design thinking, which has definitely gained a different sort of reputation now than it used to. But this is from 1999 when like design thinking was brand new. And I wanted to play it, first of all, because like very little has changed about the process. So I'm just going to play a short clip of it. But I think it really brings into contrast the fact that like a lot of this stuff was meant for like, we're going to do all this research, we're going to do all this stuff. And then like at the end, let me see. Here it is.
I don't think we can hear the audio if it's coming through. Huh? I don't think we can hear the audio, Matt, if it's going through.
Oh, dang, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I'll send the thing. This never really works the way you think it will. Speaking of user research being needed. So anyways, I'll send the link, but basically the gist of it is that like, there was this one clip in there and he said the guy in the black turtleneck, which like, again, black turtlenecks never change. He said, enlightened trial and error is always going to be the work of the lone genius. And I feel like that's like absolutely true. And then the funny thing that's about to happen is then they're like, all of these people who are in a design thinking workshop, they're like, actually the founder of IDEO is gonna go over here in this corner and he's gonna end up being the person who decides. So IDEO kind of like admits that it's a bit of a sham. And then they're like, actually like it doesn't really matter, all this design thinking, a lot of this like brainstorming stuff, a lot of this like theatrical, like getting the entire like company involved. You know, it all comes down to who's gonna be the most persuasive, who's able to build something that's real, show it in high fidelity, who's able to solve a real user problem based on their intuition, and like, you know, how are they gonna solve it within the technical constraints? And like all of that kind of happens in this one moment of this video. And I think it's just amazing that this was like 1999 and all of this like truth was sort of embedded in this very nice like clip. And then we sort of, nobody really let that stick. They kind of like took everything else and were like, let's do this instead. So that is my very grouchy design talk. Thank you for inviting me and letting me sort of try to counter me on some of the popular wisdom that you've received. I would love it if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Also, you can check out my website where I write a bunch of this stuff and follow me on Blue Sky, where I don't really write much now, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was a really cool presentation. I think I was hearing some good reactions in the audience from some of your takes. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, I can repeat it.
Are we able to hear me?
Um,
Go over the laptop. Hi, my name is Catherine. Thank you for coming by to give this presentation today. Lots of great insights. And I love the honesty. I think sometimes people want to like hold your hand through UX advice and it's like, that's not helpful to anybody. I did have a question because I've been hearing a lot of these insights about how to display process work and how, again, nobody cares about sticky notes or customer journey maps and all that. And I'm like, okay, I got it. And I heard that there's a lot more importance on like your personality as a designer and what kind of voice and strengths you bring to the table. What is your advice for young designers on how to identify that voice and be able to articulate that in like interviews or through your portfolio? I know you talked about like make your portfolio unique. If you like Magic the Gathering, like show that to me. So I'm curious if you have insights about that.
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. And I'm glad that you asked it because it's easy for me to forget, like, you know, what it's like to find your voice and find what makes you unique. Your friends are the people who I think know you better than anybody else. And I think that I think that the expectation that you like present this very professional self to potential employers is something that might pressure you to not include like any of that personality or any of who you are with your friends. But I would just ask, like, when you are thinking about, presenting your portfolio and when you're putting your work together, like, hopefully you have somebody in your life who's not in this class, who's not in this room, who's not in this program, who can look at this thing and tell you, like, is that me? Would you recognize this person if I showed this to you? And if not, like, what's missing? And the other benefit of that, and having somebody you love look at your work and, like, I don't know, your mom or your sibling or whatever, like, look at your work, is hearing it from them will be really good, because they'll kind of be able to put it in words that you understand. And then when it comes down to like an interview or actually showing up to work, like, who would you rather be expected to be? Would you rather show up to work and have somebody expect you to be the same like person who you are with your family, or like this like professional persona that you've invented for like this job? And I know a lot of designers who come out of school and like it's very stressful to like show up to work and try to be this person that like you've like crafted for your portfolio. And I think like all of us really just want to like be the person we are at home, but like at work. And so I think that it's kind of funny that there is that pressure and that stress to like sand down those edges and angles. But I think honestly, like the more you can be the person who you are with your friends and your family, the more honest you can be, the more less stress you'll have and less like thought processes you'll be going through. And the more like you'll be able to actually just like speak genuinely from a position of like who you are. I hope that's helpful. This is a topic that I could like go very, very deep on too, because I know it's very challenging and very stressful. But
also very personal.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you be authentic in all spheres of your life and like demonstrate that? That's, I think, hard for anybody. Yeah.
Yes, it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable because people will reject you. You will get rejections from potential employers. And if you're going out there and being like, I'm like, check this out, like, here are my tattoos, whatever. And people are like, oh, I don't like that you have tattoos. They're like, that feels way worse than if it was like you didn't show off any of that and it was just your work. And they said they didn't like your work and you're like, okay, I can handle that. So yeah, it's vulnerable, it's really hard, but reality is you'll get a lot of rejection either way. So better to be rejected for the things you can't change than for the things you can.
All right, thank you. I'll let someone else ask another question now. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? Sanjana's coming up.
Hi, Matt. This is Sanjana. You're seeing everyone else through my computer right now. I had a quick question about when you're talking about being persuasive and things like that. Who are the people that you are persuading? Is it your design manager? Is it your teammates? Like people in marketing, higher ups? Like who is that you're pitching to?
Yeah, it's usually the higher ups. It's usually your boss or your boss's boss or whoever's making the decisions, like whoever's writing the checks. This is a thing that is tough because being a designer, if you're walking into a room and somebody's like, oh, here's Sanjana, the designer, you're already a bit at a disadvantage because people are kind of gonna say like, oh, okay, cool, you're here to like tell me about colors and stuff. What is really important when being persuasive is to first of all like kind of immediately try to disarm the people who you're talking to with like enthusiasm, kindness, like be like, hey, like, I know you think I'm here just to talk about colors, but like, let me really exceed the expectations that have been set for me as a designer by showing you something very deeply insightful. Design, I think, then on the flip side of the coin of like having a disadvantage of like being seen about, oh, we're here to just make it pretty, is like we actually, by being in touch with the principles of visual communication, have a way of like deeply impacting people on like a psychological level. I've seen some really amazing things where like you're like, hey, I took the checkout page that we were doing. Let me show you a version of it. I'm not going to tell you anything about why I did it or why it's better, whatever. I just want you to use it. And then they're going to like look at it and they're going to be like, this is way better. Why weren't we doing this all along? And I think that that is such a really powerful tool that only designers can do. Like, product manager with a spreadsheet and Google Doc, whatever, they're going to struggle to be as persuasive as you are if you lean into your strengths as a visual storyteller and as like a communicator. So literally answering your question, the person who you're persuading is your boss, or you're usually like the business lead, the marketing manager, the person. And how you're going to persuade them is like leaning on your strengths as a visual storyteller, not trying to become some other role.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really interesting. I was thinking that if it's like your manager that you're pitching to, are they not also a designer? And would you be talking about your designs in like that I'm communicating with a designer, which is going to be different than communicating with someone from marketing or someone from business? But that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. The designers, don't worry about convincing designers.
Yeah, no,
That's
checks
easy,
out.
Yeah. It's the people who aren't designers who you have to persuade.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Did anyone else want to ask anything?
Hello. Hi, Matt. My name's Agnes. I don't know if you touched on this already because I came kind of late, but I was wondering if you have any advice for people who are like gonna go into internships, if you have like any direct advice for like how to land a full-time offer after that or something, like in that perspective.
Be irreplaceable. Like, and this can be like so many different things you can do. Like if anybody, people are going to ask you to do a lot of things when you're an intern. And then most of the time it's going to be dumb stuff that like is menial and soul crushing. However, if anybody ever asks you to like set up the printer or whatever, do that, because then you're the only person who knows how the printer works. They can't get rid of you, because if they do, you can't print anything. So I think that like, it sounds really silly. This is like not related to design at all. But I think a lot of the times I see people who are really interested in like trying to distinguish themselves and like really stand out or whatever. But most of the time, the way that you become irreplaceable is by knowing how the work is done and like being relied on, being a reliable person. And so, yeah, just finding those opportunities to like be the person in the office who knows how the copier works, being the person who like, whenever, they have like lunch on Tuesday or whatever, you like bring in some really good brownies or something. Like that stuff as an intern, like you'll have so many opportunities to do the great design stuff later. Getting to know your colleagues, getting to know their names, getting them to know your name, and getting them to know why you're there. It's a lot easier if you're like, yeah, I'll just show up and do the stuff. Then that tends to work out a lot better than like trying to like, try to climb the ladder too quickly.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Matt. Can we have another round of applause? We really appreciate you joining us, especially on East Coast time. We really appreciated your insights, and they're really well said. I'm sure people would love to connect with you. If so, are you good if we like share your slides to our club?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, just share the link. Feel free to email me. I'm just gonna add my personal email address to the slides. If you ever need advice, want to do a portfolio review, I'm always happy to do that. I promise that I am not like mean or anything like that. My portfolio review will be overwhelmingly positive, and occasionally I'll just tell you to like delete half the stuff because you've already convinced me by the first 2 sentences. So.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you so much again. Yeah,
Thank
have a
you.
good rest of your night.
Thanks.